So I'm going to pause. All right. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say I am so excited to be here with Ed Ligonde. We wanted to make sure we start on time and stop on time. So with that being said, it's 10 a.m. and we will get started. So I think everyone can see my screen. And just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Cindy Flynn. My firm is Hackler Flynn and Associates, and we focus all on employment law, protecting and defending business owners. And as a kid, I had, my parents ran a printing company. And over the years, you know, I'd go in and I'd staple papers and fold brochures, and I got to see what it was like firsthand to run a business and what it was like to have employees. And over the years, you know, employee issues came up and they really tore my parents apart. Just litigation and one thing after another. And so my parents ended in bankruptcy and divorce. But I knew early on I wanted to be an employment lawyer protecting and defending business owners. That's why I started my firm. And with COVID coming out, you know, in the last several months, I think that there's going to be a huge rise in employment lawsuits over the next 6 to 12 months. And so our goal as an employment attorney representing the business side is to protect and defend those business owners and to make sure we are doing everything we can to prevent lawsuits or at the very least mitigate any damages. So with that being said, I do have a disclaimer. I'm going to say that this is on behalf of Ed and I, because I am a lawyer. You know, content on this webinar should not be considered legal advice and is for informational purposes only. Communications made through this webinar and or participating in this webinar do not create an attorney-client relationship, although we are happy to create one with you. In addition, Hackler Flynn and Associates is not responsible for any content that may be accessed from third-party resources that's linked through this webinar. So today's topics, these are some of the things that I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ed. We're going to go over the CARES Act, individual stimulus payments, expanded unemployment benefits, and then as an added bonus, because things are starting to open up across the country, you know, how we can safely bring employees back to work, and then with just one quick slide about working remotely if we have time for it. So as the coronavirus outbreak continues to impact markets and industries in the United States and really around the world, businesses are now confronting significant and unique challenges. Successful navigation of these challenges will require thoughtful and comprehensive planning. And the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as CARES, amends numerous provisions of federal tax law affecting both businesses and individuals. Many of the changes aim to help taxpayers conserve or generate cash either prospectively or by amending prior year's tax returns. So with the CARES Act, I mean, it was signed into law March. The Senate unanimously passed it 96-0. The CARES Act provides $2.2 trillion in stimulus to individuals, businesses, and hospitals in response to the economic distress caused by COVID-19, this pandemic. Then, of course, the House of Representatives passed it, and then President Trump signed it into law that same day on March 27th. So this provides stimulus to individuals, businesses, and hospitals in response to the economic impact caused by COVID-19. Part of the CARES Act includes a loan program for small businesses, and these loans can be forgiven through a process that incentivizes companies to retain employees. And so for today, there's a lot in the CARES Act, and a lot is still being interpreted. But we were going to focus on the PPP loan today, expanded unemployment benefits, and then individual stimulus as well. So under the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, originally it was $350 billion. and it covers the period of February 15th, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. And this greatly expands SBA loan eligibility. The loan program allows businesses suffering due to the coronavirus outbreak to borrow money for a variety of qualified costs related to employee compensation and benefits. And then, because it ran out in a matter of days, on April 24th, the PPP was funded with an additional $310 billion in loans. So what is a qualified cost? This includes payroll costs, and payroll costs are defined as wages, commissions, salary, or similar compensation to an employee, payment of a cash or tip equivalent, payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowance for dismissal or separation, payment for group health care benefits, including premiums, payment for any retirement benefits, and payment of state and local tax assessed on the compensation of employees. Now, this excludes compensation for employees earning more than $100,000 annually. So, for example, if you have an employee making $105,000 a year, they would be capped out at the $100,000 per year. And you basically disregard the $5,000 over the $100,000 annually. We've been getting a lot of questions about how to handle commission for employees. And under the FLSA, to determine the rate of pay, you would take the wages plus commission divided by the number of hours. And this is for an employee who earns commissions on top of a wage. Other qualified costs, of course, include mortgage interest obligations, rent, utilities, and then interest on debt incurred before the covered period. So you are eligible for a loan if you are a small business that employs 500 employees or less, or if your business is in an industry that has an employee-based size standard through the SBA that's higher than 500 employees. And that's how some of those big restaurant chains we've all heard of have been getting funded, but and a few of them have given it back. But the CARES Act does not describe when the number of employees should be identified for the purposes of the SBA loan regulations. You look at the average number of employees in each pay period over the immediately preceding 12 months. There will likely be additional guidance on how to calculate the number of employees, but it's based, how the SBA does it is it's based on the employee headcount by full-time equivalent, which essentially means if you have 2 employees both working at 20 hours per week, that would equate to 1 full-time employee. So to calculate full-time equivalents, you take the number of part-time employees you have multiplied by the average of total part-time number of hours worked in a week and divided by 30. And just to note here, an employee who's working 30 hours per week is considered full-time for these purposes. So you had to be operational on February 15th of this year, and then of course have employees. So the PPP loan is limited to the lesser of the box to the right or the box to the left. And so part A, the sum of the average monthly payroll costs times 2.5 plus any disaster loan taken out after January 31st of 2020 that has been refinanced into the Paycheck Protection Loan, or $10 million. The term payroll cost is defined to specifically not include compensation of an individual in excess of that $100,000 annual salary, and it's prorated. And then the amount is intended to cover 8 weeks of payroll expenses and any additional amounts for making payments towards debt obligations, so that as a business owner, you don't get behind. The 8-week period may be applied to any time frame between February 15th, 2020 and June 30th, 2020. Seasonal business expenses will be measured using a 12-week period beginning February 15th of last year or March of last year, whichever the seasonal employer chooses. The interest rate may not exceed 1%. It's a maximum maturity of 2 years. And there are no prepayment penalties or fees. All payments are deferred for 6 months. So that means if you get funding today, you have 8 weeks to use that funding. And then if it's not fully forgiven, then the payments are deferred for 6 months. But interest will continue to accrue over that period, but the interest rate is, extremely low, that 1% interest rate. So on the forgiveness side, these loans may be eligible for forgiveness on a tax-free basis. An eligible borrower of a covered loan guaranteed under the SBA is eligible for forgiveness of the SBA loan in an amount equal to the following costs incurred and payments made during the covered period. That's payroll costs, right? And that includes employee salaries up to an annual rate of $100,000, interest payments on covered mortgage payments, so not your principal payments, covered rent payments, and covered utility payments. The covered period means the 8-week period beginning on the SBA loan origination date. Taxpayers should note that the covered period, as currently stated, is for 8 weeks and not defined to match the loan term. So I know there are several groups lobbying about this for the covered period, because some restaurants, they're not able to open yet they're getting funded, and so they have the tough decision to make whether or not they reopen and pay their employees and have them essentially not do much if the restaurant's not able to open. So we see different specific groups lobbying for different terms. But if you would like to use the Paycheck Protection Program for other business-related expenses like inventory, you certainly can do that, but just note that that portion of the loan is not going to be forgiven. So there are some specifics with it. The purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program is to help you retain your employees at their current base pay. If you keep all of your employees, the entirety of the loan will be forgiven. Now, if you lay off employees, the forgiveness will be reduced by the percent decrease in the number of employees. If your total payroll expenses on workers making less than $100,000 annually decreases by more than 25%, loan forgiveness will be reduced by that same amount. If you've already laid off some of your employees, which I know many of you have, and I know a lot of our clients have, you can still be forgiven for the full amount of your payroll costs if you rehire your employees by June 30th, 2020. The purpose of this provision is to encourage employers to rehire any employees who have already been laid off due to the COVID-19 crisis. Borrowers that rehire workers previously laid off will not be penalized for having a reduced payroll at the beginning of the period. There are other tax provisions that are included, and you should certainly keep in touch with your CPA about how to take advantage of those provisions, but at least this gives you the basis of what you want to talk to them about. So to encourage employers to rehire any employees who have already been laid off due to COVID-19, borrowers that rehire, will not be penalized for having that reduced pay period, right? If you rehire your employees by June 30th, you'll not be penalized. And then to seek this forgiveness, a borrower must submit the application with the documentation verifying the number of employees and pay rates, canceled checks showing mortgages, rent, or utility payments. I hope at this point everyone is in line with their bank for the PPP loan, because there has been some discussion that it might run out again very quickly. So, and we've seen over the last few weeks that the smaller banks are able to fund those loans. So, and also, if you need a list of any of the banks that are accepting applications without having a pre-existing relationship, just email me. My email address is at the bottom, and I can send you that list so that you can at least have some option there. So this is just one other loan other than the PPP loan that was really meant to help small businesses. And this is the Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loans. That is a mouthful, so I'm gonna call it EIDLS. And the SBA Act, or the SBA, contains a provision which provides low interest loans to help businesses and homeowners during declared disasters. And that's in the form of the Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loans. Typically, These loans cover physical damage to property and economic injury following a disaster. So we are getting a question right now, who actually forgives the loan, the bank or the SBA? And it's really, so the bank funds the loan, but once you give them all the information about it and everything else, it's both. They work hand in hand together. So the SBA is issuing guidance on what needs to be able to have the loan actually forgiven, and then the bank is supposed to look at that guidance and then forgive it. So I hope that helps. And so the economic injury disaster loans, they cover physical damage to property and economic injury following a disaster, and the loans are to be used if insurance and the Federal Emergency Management Agency funds don't fully cover the disaster assistance needed. So from the period between January 31st of this year and December 31st of this year, that's known as the covered period. And EIDL eligibility is greatly expanded to cover the economic injury resulting from COVID-19. So now, eligible borrowers include most businesses with less than 500 employees operating under a sole proprietorship independent contractor and certain others, including most nonprofit entities. Furthermore, EIDLs may be approved solely on the basis of an applicant's credit score or by use of alternative methods to gauge the applicant's ability to repay. Additionally, applicants may request an advance of up to $10,000 within 3 days after the administrator receives the application, subject to verification that the entity is eligible under the program. The advance may be used for any allowable purposes under the Small Business Act and is not subject to repayment, even if the loan request is ultimately denied. So that's important to note. And then just one more thing on the CARES Act for businesses. The CARES Act waives the requirement of a personal guarantee for loans up to $200,000. The requirement that the applicant must be in business for a year, but of course you must have been in operation by January 31st of 2020, and then the credit elsewhere test. So for the individual stimulus payments, individuals that are compliant in filing their tax returns and are not claimed as dependents by another person will receive a rebate from the IRS. The amount of the rebate depends on the adjusted gross income, what type of tax filer the taxpayer is, and whether the taxpayer has children. So taxpayers making $75,000 or $150,000 married filing jointly or less will receive the full amount of the rebate, which is $1,200 or $2,400 if married filing jointly. And then additionally, taxpayers will receive $500 per child claimable as a dependent. The rebate declines $5 for every each $100 of adjusted gross income. So the limits are, so the rebate declines the $5 for each $100 of the adjusted gross income, exceeding $150,000 for joint returns, $112,500 for heads of households, and then $75,000 for all others. So to determine the amount of rebate payable, the IRS will use the taxpayer's federal income tax return for 2019 if you're ahead of things and you already have it on file. If the taxpayer has not filed his or her 2019 tax return, the IRS will use the 2018 return. If you haven't filed for either, for example, you collected Social Security but did not have enough taxable income to necessitate the filing of a return, the IRS will then determine you are eligible for a check based on your form SSA 1099, the Social Security Benefit Statement. And then for federal tax purposes, the rebates will be characterized as refundable credits against liability for federal income tax for 2020. The rebates are payable only to eligible individuals and not included in gross income. And for purposes of this rebate, eligible individuals do not include non-resident alien individuals, any individual claimable as a dependent by somebody else, and then trust and estates. So importing existing rules on advanced refunding of tax credits, CARES basically treats these rebates as advances of tax credits allowable for taxable year 2020. If the amount of the rebate is less than the credit allowable for 2020, then the taxpayer can claim the balance of the credit when filing the 2020 return. If the rebate ends up being greater than the credit allowable, then the taxpayer will not have to repay the excess because the credit for 2020 cannot be reduced below zero. Moving on to unemployment insurance benefits. Now, I'm just gonna start off by saying we have a lot of clients who have 100 minimum wage earners, and they are wondering how to navigate between the increased unemployment benefits that I'm going to cover now, or whether to bring people back to work and have them pay less. And honestly, it's a decision you need to make as a business owner, but there are a couple workarounds. I'm happy to talk to anybody about that offline. If I can get to it, I certainly will. But CARES temporarily expands unemployment insurance for workers in various ways, including amounts available to workers through state-operated unemployment insurance programs. The law expands the scope of individuals who are eligible for unemployment benefits, including those who are furloughed or out of work as a direct result of COVID-19. This includes self-employed or gig workers and those who have exhausted existing state and federal unemployment benefit provisions. The only individuals expressly excluded from coverage are those that have the ability to telework or remote work with pay, and those who are receiving paid sick leave or other paid benefits, even if they otherwise satisfy the criteria for unemployment under the new law. So this increase in benefits in qualifying recipients can receive, on top of amounts payable by the state's program, an additional $600 per week for up to 4 months, fully funded by the federal government. The extra funds may be paid as a separate check or together with the traditional unemployment check provided by the state. Additionally, recipients who were previously nearing the end of their unemployment can apply for an extension of 13 weeks with their state unemployment agency. However, the total benefit in California may not extend beyond 39 weeks. And so we have a lot of clients who are facing, whether or not they bring their employees back to work early and have them go off of unemployment and could make less. And we are really recommending that you talk to your staff and tell them that, unemployment benefits can last up to 39 weeks in California. And because of the uncertainty of, the fact that COVID may come back, or hopefully it's gone for good, but because there's so much uncertainty about when this pandemic will end, they may need to use those unemployment benefits in the future. So if you can bring employees back to work, it's certainly something that, we want to recommend rather than having your employees stay on unemployment. And going into bringing your employees back, so OSHA, for businesses that have been able to remain open as they're part of the critical sectors, or for when the stay-at-home order is lifted in California, OSHA has promulgated guidelines to assist employers in determining what safety precautions are necessary in their workforce. And I really encourage everyone to check out www.osha.gov because there's a lot to it. With healthcare workers and healthcare support, they are considered those high-risk categories. For employees with high-frequency contact with the general public, such as school staff, those working in high-volume retail, those working in high population density workplaces, those constitute the medium exposure risk group. And then employees with minimum occupational contact with the general public and our coworkers, such as your office employees, your remote workers, those constitute the lower exposure risk group. So there's a lot of analysis that goes behind when you start bringing your employee back according to OSHA. So employee categories to assess risk and determine next steps. The importance here is to keep in mind those returning from affected areas, although the travel ban has said, there's been a travel ban in place for a while now, so that's not too much of an issue these days, but those who are in close contact with those returning from affected areas, those who have tested positive for COVID-19, and those showing signs or symptoms. So employees returning from affected areas, I just want to cover this just in case you have an employee who's coming back. They may be required to self-quarantine for 14 days and may be required to undergo mandatory health screenings by federal, state, and local authorities. Now, as an employer, you can require a medical release to return to work for these employees, and you may want to maintain a high level of alert with regard to these employees. Now, if you have employees in close contact with individuals returning from affected areas, they may be required to self-quarantine, and the employer may require a medical release to return to work for these employees as well. And again, you may want to maintain that high level of alert with regard to these employees. Now, given the fact that we're trying to bring everyone back to work, hopefully in May, June, July, over the next few months, it's probably not a matter of if someone tests positive for COVID-19, it's a matter of when. And if anyone wants our, we have like a COVID-19 response plan. If anyone wants a copy of that, I'm happy to send it out to you. But if you do have somebody who tests positive for COVID-19 in your workplace, immediately send them home or have them remain at home. Immediately treat the affected areas in which the employee worked as per CDC recommendations. Advise the employee and or the customers who were in contact with the affected employee, and offer reimbursement of medical testing for those employees. It's important to note, however, that you do not want to identify the employee by name, but you do want to give them workers' compensation paperwork, if applicable, and then contact CDC and the local health department. If you have an employee who's showing signs or symptoms of the employee at work, you can certainly send the employee home upon observation of signs or symptoms consistent with COVID-19, and essentially that's the fever, the cough, and you may require a medical release for them to return to work. You immediately want to treat the affected areas in which the employee worked as per CDC recommendations, and then you can advise your employees and or customers who were in contact with the affected employee. But again, do not identify the employee by name. And you can certainly emphasize there's been no diagnosis, but you're just acting in an abundance of caution. And so in order to assess the risk, you may ask your employees to inform you if they've encountered someone diagnosed with COVID-19. You can ask them to inform you if they have any symptoms of the virus or they themselves have been diagnosed with COVID-19. And you can ask them to inform you of any recent travel to those highly affected areas. You may not, however, target individual employees unless you have an objective basis for asking. And we are to the point in running this firm to where we only represent the best, most genuine, kind-hearted business owners, and we've seen a lot of them make the mistake of saying, oh, everyone over 60 doesn't have to come in. Well, that's an age discrimination lawsuit. They're just asking for it unintentionally. But keep that in mind as you start to bring your employees back. You don't want to say like, oh, if you're over this certain age, you don't have to come in. You have to have that objective basis for asking, and then you can't ask about any other medical disability or underlying medical condition that needs to be kept separate and apart. And then as far as safety precautions, definitely follow CDC recommendations. There's the website. Bottom line is you want to ensure that all frequently touched surfaces are cleaned and disinfected regularly throughout the day. Tables, doorknobs, light switches, countertops, handles, desks, phones, keyboards, toilets, faucets, sinks, anything you can think of, all frequently touched surfaces, they're clean. Err on the side of precaution when assessing the risk. CDC has provided a risk assessment guide on their website. I encourage everyone to check it out. Avoid conducting anything that could be considered a medical examination yourself, with the exception of taking employees' temperatures. So that's a question we've been getting frequently. The EEOC has issued guidance that it's okay for employers to take the temperature of their employees. Generally, so before COVID-19, we would never ever say that's okay, because the EEOC has issued guidance that it's okay. I mean, you can do it. I still want you to proceed with caution though. If you are concerned about a particular employee displaying other symptoms of COVID-19, send them home and advise them to consult with a doctor to receive medical clearance to return to work. And if there's a question of whether or not COVID-19 was contracted in the course of the employee's work, provide workers' compensation paperwork and leave it up to your carrier to determine. This is really uncharted territory. And while typically there would not be liability, for example, contracting a cold or flu at work, this is an unprecedented situation. I know you probably hear that word 1,000 times a day, unprecedented situation, but leave it up to the workers' comp carrier to decide if there's coverage there. And then for OSHA, OSHA's general duty clause requires, before I get into OSHA and some safety precautions, I have a question here. Please let everyone know how you would recommend testing for temperatures by not using the same device on every employee, as they may have it and you transfer the virus from checking other temperatures. You're absolutely right. You don't want to use the same thermometer. They have disposable ones, and you can also have, I still believe checking people's temperatures is considered a medical examination. And like I said a minute ago, I definitely would not recommend it in this situation in general. But in this situation, because of the pandemic, you know, you can, I guess, with EEOC, but they have throwaway thermometers, so something that's just disposable there. You can certainly try using those touch-free devices, but we would say, like, to have the employees check their own temperatures too, unless you want to hire a medical professional to stand out there and do it, which I think would be either one thing to do, hiring someone to do it who is a medical professional, or having the employees do it themselves. So hopefully that gives you some options. So with OSHA, the general duty clause requires employers to furnish to each worker employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. Employees may refuse to work only if they believe they are in imminent danger. And OSHA actually defines what imminent danger is to include any conditions or practices in any place of employment which are such that a danger exists, which can reasonably be expected to cause death or serious physical harm immediately or before the imminence of such danger can be eliminated through the enforcement provisions. So there is some guidance there. And then just real quick on a work from home, so many businesses had to transition their staff to work remotely very, very quickly. And a couple things I want to note on that is, please make sure you have a written agreement with your staff that this is temporary, and that really outlines the guidelines in order for them to work from home. You can say that this is while the California stay-at-home order is in place, or some other like finite period of time. You want to describe who's eligible to work from home, because not all jobs obviously can be performed from offsite locations. We are recommending, you know, while during this pandemic, that if you can have your employees work from home and continue to work from home, you know, please do so. And then it's important in that written agreement to lay out the expectations, you know, the start time, the end time, being available and responsive throughout the day, and that they still need to follow company procedures. One area I think a lot of business owners are going to be hit hard on is timekeeping systems. So for your non-exempt employees, you still need to keep track of their meal periods and rest periods, even though they're working from home. And this does not have to be anything fancy. It can be a very simple Excel spreadsheet they turn into you on Fridays. You can also have them email you. I started work, you know, it's 8 o'clock, or I'm ending for the day, it's 5 o'clock, whatever that is. And then also have in your handbook, and in your agreement, you know, I will not work off the clock policy, because you don't want an employment lawsuit 6 months from now when an employee says, I was working 24 hours a day for you this entire time, and I've never taken a meal period, you know, I never got to take a rest period. So those things are still really, really important. And then another thing I'm not sure business owners know about is, for your remote employees, you need to reimburse them for internet and cell phone use. Otherwise, the employer would receive a windfall, because they would be passing on operating expenses to their employees, and you cannot do that as an employer. Even if the person already has a cell phone, even if the person already has internet, please make sure during this time, or during the time you have anyone working remotely, that you are in fact reimbursing them for that. And there's case law on that. So no matter who your employment attorney is, please check in with them twice a year. Do a handbook review every year as well. It's really important. You know, make sure they have an experienced team of attorneys that work behind them. And it's important to do a liability assessment early on, so that you know what's at stake. I'm getting a question here about, after applying for the PPP loan, do we receive a letter, an email, or anything that tells us we were approved? Is there a number or website to check? That's really going to depend on your bank. So I would make sure you're in good contact with your bank, and have them let you know where the status is. I know some of the bigger banks are starting to put that on the website when you log in, but you would have to check with your bank there. I have another question coming in. Do you have to record the 10-minute paid rest break, or just start, stop, and unpaid lunch? I would recommend recording the 10-minute rest breaks as well, even though, you know, under the law, it says that, you know, you're not required to. It's going to come down to your employee saying, I've never taken a rest break, and you're saying, yes, you did, and there's no proof of it. So I would suggest having that 10-minute meal period and rest period, you know, definitely tracked. And then I don't want to run out of time. I know I have a couple more questions, but I will respond to them. Let me just finish up with one more slide. We have an employment compliance checklist if anyone wants this. I'm happy to send it to you. You can text HF Law to 66866. Receive our checklist, get on our newsletter. Even though I don't actually send a newsletter, I hate newsletters. I always delete them when I get them, so I don't do that to anybody. But like the Department of Labor just came out with a new poster for COVID-19, and I wanted to make sure all of our friends and clients saw that, so I just forward that out. It's things like that. So it's not really a newsletter, but it's up-to-date news. And then this is all of my contact information. I'll go ahead and start answering these questions while I turn it over to Ed. So thank you so much. Ed, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen here. Awesome. Hope everyone's doing well. First of all, thank you, Cindy, so much for all that great content. As we've put in the post about this webinar, there's a lot of information out there. I'm sure people are getting tons and tons of emails and phone calls and things of that nature. So I appreciate you putting the time to get this together for us here. And as you mentioned, I'm Ed Lagonde with Nielsen Benefits Group. I'm the Vice President of Employee Benefits and Technology. And you know, for us, we truly believe that employee benefits is a lot more than just insurance. You know, we believe that employee benefits is the benefit of being an employee, right? And so we want to help employers focus on enhancing the entire employee experience. And before I dive into the presentation here, one of the things I wanted to do is give a major shout out to all the employers, all the HR pros out there. Just recently, I posted a t-shirt on LinkedIn about something I thought was really cool, which is saying, you know, don't underestimate an HR professional who survived the 2020 COVID pandemic. And I think that's so true. So just a shout out to you guys. And And I've seen what some of our clients have even done in response to this, and getting people to move to a fully remote atmosphere, or still trying to engage their team as much as they can. So just, if I can give you a clap from afar, I'm doing it now. So again, just kudos to you guys. Again, so today what I wanted to go over is to give you just some ideas and incite some ideas about how to continue to engage your employees and enhancing the employee experience, especially right now as we're all in this together, we're going through a pandemic, how we can plan for these things, how we can share ideas with one another as well. So this is just meant to give some ideas, and some of them may work because you have a certain type of employer, and some of them may not, but hopefully we can all share ideas together and continue to make ourselves better employers of choice, right? So one of the things that we think is important in looking at the entire employee experience is it's really a multifaceted approach. Just yesterday, I was fortunate enough to be on a panel with other benefit professionals in the nation, and we talked a lot about culture and what culture means. And one of the things that we came down to was the fact that, a lot of times there's this preconceived notion that culture is the perks, right? The fun stuff an employee might get, like the Google experience, which is a sleep pod at the office, or some of those fun things like that. But when it really comes down to it, it's a little bit more philosophical in our belief. We believe that culture is really how you make an employee feel. Do they feel bought into your culture? Do they feel bought into the atmosphere that you've created? As an HR professional, as an employer, you have an amazing opportunity. You get to help create that employee experience for an employee, the engagement. You get to create the communication channels and bring in support programs and touch so many people in so many different ways. Obviously, they're there to do a job, and we understand that truly. But I think, as HR professionals and employers, you guys are the heartbeat of the organization. So bringing in a lot of these things can really help enhance that employee experience. And what we've seen throughout the last 6 weeks and even longer than that is everyone's responding to the pandemic very differently, right? But they're falling into three different camps that we've seen so far. The engaged population, which are people, maybe seeing this as an opportunity. Maybe they're seeing this as a time to learn, to grow, to connect with other teammates, connect with family members and friends and things of that nature. So they're embracing it as much as they can and trying to be a positive influence. And then you have some that might be a little bit more disengaged, who may be struggling because, hey, this is new to me. I'm used to structure, and this is not structured anymore. And so I need a little bit more guidance. And then maybe you have some employees that fall right in the middle that can be pushed one way or the other. So I think as employers, we can really help if we can take that step back and understand where our employees fall in these buckets. It really helps us understand what kind of programs we can bring and what kind of support we can bring to help enhance that experience for them. We've seen about two different types of mentalities where employers are kind of falling right now, where again, within a time of crisis like this, some employers are saying, we're going to take this as an opportunity to grow, to push our mission statement, to connect with our clients, things like that. And some are saying, hey, I just want to make sure we're not burning anymore. We just want to maintain as much as we can. Whatever it is that you're doing, again, I gave kudos a moment ago, just keep doing as much as you can to try to connect with your employees as much as possible, because what they're going to remember is how much support you're giving them at the end of the day as well. Okay, those are things that are going to continue to help you become a true employer of choice. We're big fans of feedback. We want to learn exactly what employees are going through. Every single employee is different. We're dealing with a very multi-generational workforce. And you might have some employees that are at different stages of life. Maybe some of them have kids at home right now and are trying to juggle being a full-time employee and also now a full-time teacher and parent, right? And so they're balancing so many different hats. Maybe you have different employees in different stages. So we can think about the lifestyle that employees are going through. How do they access their benefits? How easy is it for them to access the benefit offerings? And again, at the end of the day, they don't know what they don't know, right? So if we can continue to communicate things that maybe people forget about, we're going to continue to allow people to feel a little bit more at peace with the offerings that you have spent so much time and money to implement for them at the end of the day. How do we best support our employees and remain productive, right? So what we've seen is helping employees with structure and perhaps employees enjoy projects. Maybe you have a remote staff that's struggling with keeping attention. So bringing in some resources to help them remain as productive as possible. And then are there maybe some new ideas out there, which we're hopefully going to share today, to implement, and some as cost effective as possible. Obviously, we know budget is a very big issue these days. And so we're going to talk about some of those as well. Okay. One of the things that we've seen is if you can pluck a lot of those out, is to truly take a moment to establish your mission, your values, your why you have even hired these employees in the first place, what kind of product or mission statement that you have, and continue to invest that back into your employees as much as you can to reinforce why we're all here together, why we're all connected as well. Okay. So here's some other ideas. We tried to break them down into a few different bubbles here, bringing in some engagement, how to communicate, some support programs for families and for yourselves as well. Again, as I mentioned, we're all going through this together, and some different technology resources that you can bring. As the Vice President of Employee Benefits and Technology, a lot of people sometimes ask me, what's your favorite form of technology? And I have to say, it's in-person interaction. Obviously, right now we're doing a lot of social distancing as much as we can, depending on, what type of employer you are. But we found that just, virtual meetings like this can still be face-to-face, right? And I've gotten over the hump of showing my face and showing, my house and things like that. And I've seen so many employers doing the same thing, because it's one thing to talk on the phone, but it's another thing to still be able to see your face and be able to share your experiences. Perhaps you can also help employees stick to a schedule. If they can somehow mimic a typical day-to-day as much as possible, that's going to help with the structure. We've seen some of our clients help employees with that because they have kids at home, or maybe they have other obligations at home that are helping or that are taken away from that focus. If they can stick to a particular schedule, allows them to be a lot more productive. You have employees that have voices, and maybe they want to take those opportunities. We talked about the engaged population. Maybe this might be a great opportunity to build an internal wellness team or engagement team to help you create that. That way you're expanding your own team and allowing other employees to have a voice and to step forward and to share some ideas to help engage your staff. And something that we've been doing ourselves as well is stepping forward and sharing stories. And we've seen that it helps employees connect with one another, connect with you as an employer, and they can share their personal stories, maybe some of their concerns, maybe some triumphs that they've had. And we've seen a lot of success with engaging population as well. Okay. Something that I think is a really great form, or a great medium to communicate with employees, especially nowadays, is, again, I know we're dealing with a multi-generational workforce, but it's even funny. I was just talking to my mom yesterday, and she was telling me how she wanted to just text me. And it was pretty amazing to hear that. So one of the things that we've decided to look at over the last couple of years is, how do people like to receive information? And so there's this also preconceived notion that the younger populations just want a text message and things of that nature. But based on our research, it's actually spanning wide across all generations. And of course, you're going to receive information the way you want to receive it. But one of the most effective ways we've seen to give at least little tidbits of information is text message. So if you can, we urge you to try that if you feel comfortable doing it. And one of the ways that you can remove or keep some anonymity with it is by licensing a software to do it. One of our clients actually does this, and be happy to share more after this about what they do. But the reason why we've decided to look at that as a potential medium to help educate and communicate is because text messages have a 98% open rate. If anyone's anything like me, and I have an iPhone, I despise seeing that little red number next to the text message box, but how many open text messages I have. But the feeling is a little bit different with email, right? There's something about a text message that has a sense of urgency to it. And so that's why text messages have a 98% open rate, whereas emails are a little bit lower, or a lot lower really, at 6%. Another medium we found to be very, very helpful is by building a one-stop shop for your employees. One of the things we've learned with this pandemic is just access to information and having that information at that drop of a hat. So if you can have a single site or a website, and these are things that we can share with you and you can build, or we can help you build, and things of that nature. But it's a wonderful resource to just allow your employees to have a one-stop shop for those. So some of you might have company intranets and things like that. Love those ideas. I definitely recommend reminding your employees that they can get access to those situations there too. Or you can have something like this, which is a custom benefits portal, and it can be branded to your organization, and you can bring in tons of telemedicine resources, health and wellness, anything really. So really the sky is the limit when it comes to these types of resources. So other types of support programs, HR support. Again, you're not alone. We're all in this together. So we have tons of HR support. You've got amazing resource here in Cindy as well, or your other employment attorneys, your benefit professionals. There's also the Think HRs of the world, SHRM. Use those resources as much as you can. You know, knowledge is power in these types of arenas. And again, one of the benefits that we've found to be very beneficial to employees in this time is behavioral health employee assistance programs. A lot of you might have life and disability benefits where you have an employee assistance program embedded in there. Maybe you're paying for a standalone solution at the end of the day. We actually researched the utilization of these, and there's over 78% of employers offer these, but less than 4% actually use them. And it's such an amazing resource. It's unlimited, 24/7 access to licensed master's level consultants. You have employees that are going through a tough time right now. You yourself might be going through a tough time right now. Take advantage of those resources because, again, a lot of times they're free. And if you're paying for them, you know, use it. Get the best return on investment if you can. There's family planning programs and support. One of the things that I think is amazing too is looking up local nonprofits and finding ways to support them as much as you can, even just promoting them or sharing it with your employee population, and encouraging employees to look up local nonprofits themselves and trying to find different ways to support them. We have some clients that are nonprofits that obviously right now donations are low. So if we can try to find ways to support them, or local businesses as well, I think we're truly helping the masses grow. And then one of the best ways we found to allow an employee to feel really connected to your population or to your organization is to paint a medal on their chest, right? Show appreciation for employees if they've had a triumph, if they've done something well, or maybe they completed a project. Anytime we see those types of positive reinforcement, it really helps that employee engage and connect as much as you can. These are some additional virtual resources. We've had some clients do some really amazing things with regards to behavioral habits and healthy habits or health and wellness and things of that nature. And so those things can still be brought to a virtual atmosphere. You can create a library of resources for your employees and brand it to your organization, or you can contract with other wellness companies in your area. Cooking demos. We've had some clients do cooking demos. We think it's amazing, especially if you have a population that's spending a lot more time at home. I myself, I've been doing way more cooking at home than I've done my entire life. So now I'm looking up really cool recipes and trying to share some of those with some of my teammates as well. And it's been really fun. It's a different way to connect with my team, but at the same time, I'm now looking up really cool, fun, healthy recipes to share. And then telemedicine. A lot of you have medical plans where the telemedicine is actually built into the medical plan. Use that as much as you can. It's mutually beneficial for you as an employer because the cost of using the benefit itself is built into the plan, so you're already paying for it. But at the same time, the employee saves money too, and convenience, because then it's like FaceTiming a doctor for urgent care type situations. So we definitely recommend trying to use those as much as you possibly can. Or if you're paying for a solution on your own, I definitely recommend pushing that as much as possible, because then less people are going to urgent care and paying a much higher premium for it. There's also other financial wellness programs, like you as an employer, you're going to see significant tax savings. That was also part of the CARES Act as well. Employee needs and prescription savings programs. We can talk a little bit more about those as well, just to keep within our time here. So how do we get started? So there's a lot of different things to consider. Think about the culture of your organization, the business type. I know there's essential businesses right now where we're all still working. There's a lot of businesses right now where everyone's just still working from home. What is the access to technology for every employee? How often should we be doing something? When do I implement something? And then budget, right? There's lots and lots of questions to answer when you want to do these types of things. And one of the things that we love, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that we love feedback. We want to take a poll. We want to understand what employees want. So don't be afraid. If you can, survey your employees. And we have sample questions that you can ask, like, what do you miss about the office? What would support you from working from home? Or what are some biggest concerns that are challenges that that are going through your life right now? And what are some resources you think might help you at the end of the day. Giving your employees that voice and getting that feedback instead of making assumptions or just guessing, these are things that'll help guide exactly what you might try to do at the end of the day. Couple quick examples of how you can get started. Again, we've had some clients do cooking demos before. You can bring these internally, and again, it really depends on the budget. And if it's something that you think is cool, another idea to give your employees another outlet to engage. But you can implement a subscription model with a well-known wellness company. We've done it before as well. Another idea, as I mentioned earlier, with this finding local chefs or restaurants, a lot of them are actually more willing to do these types of things, especially right now with their doors closed. So they're going to look for different ways to still engage with the local population. So reaching out to local restaurants, local chefs, they'd be more than willing to jump on a Zoom chat or record something and do that for you as well. Or you could do what we've done. We've tried our best to research multiple free videos on YouTube and create a virtual cooking library. So that's a very free and cost-effective way to create a health and wellness cooking demo. Okay. And then educate and promoting telemedicine, as I mentioned before. Can't argue that that is an amazing resource for urgent care type situations. That way you don't have to physically leave your home and go to an office and wait for however long just to get prescribed medication at a pharmacy. Right, so these are different amazing ways. There's two different ways to access telemedicine, as I mentioned, built into your health plan, or you can pay for a standalone solution like a Teledoc or a Health USU solution. We truly believe in these because they're mutually beneficial. One, you as an employer are giving employees access to care that's very affordable. And secondly, it's also saving you from a claims perspective, right? So the more employees that are using these telemedicine solutions, you're paying a lot less in claims with regards to your medical premiums at the end of the day. All right. I talked a lot about engagement, and I wanted to make sure we're still within time. So first of all, thank you again, everyone. And I really appreciate you being here. And just, again, a major kudos and shout out to everybody that's working hard to engage your employees and to jump on and taking the time to join Cindy and I today. And Cindy, thanks again for setting this up for us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed. Happy to answer any other questions. I think I got to all the questions throughout the presentation, and Ed, it's been so fun working on this with you. So thank you guys so much.
Absolutely, and I'd be more than willing to share a copy of our presentation as well. So
yes, absolutely.
all right.
Sounds good. All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.